As y'all are moving back to your seats, I'll go ahead. I'm Joe Leathers. I'm General Manager of the Four Sixes Ranch, and Guthrie, Texas is where our main headquarters is at. I'm going to be the moderator of this meeting. I'm really excited. We've got 3 really good producer panel members. Wow, what a difference the perception in the field that this meeting has to what it was 2 years ago versus what it is today. I mean, you know, you wonder as you're working on the cattle traceability working group, it's a little bit like pouring cold molasses. You can turn it upside down and nothing comes out. If it is, you can see minute movements. But it's been refreshing to me to come to this meeting, because even the comments from the audience from a group that was for disease traceability, I see a lot more meeting in the middle. I see movement. Our panel members today are Mr. Mac Teagarden, Chief Executive Officer of Kansas Livestock Association, Mr. Brian Bell, owner of the Square B Ranch and Cattle Company, and William Avila. And all of these guys have the bios in the books, and they're extensive. They're credible. But one thing, William, that stood out to me, and I shared with you earlier about this, William has been a dairy producer since he was 7 years old. And that means a lot to me as a producer, because we not only have knowledge, but we have experience sitting up here. I think the biggest obstacle, and I'm going to make this short because y'all didn't come to listen to me, but I think the biggest obstacle we have is wanting to live in the past and trying to be too unrealistic about the future at this point. And let me give you an example of what I mean. Myself and a large part of the people in here and a large part of the operators in the cattle industry tend to remember themselves as they were as teenagers. And so we cover up our faults with clothes. But if you want to take a good look in the mirror realistically, you do a home body fat count. You know how to do that? Get by yourself, take all your clothes off, stand in front of a full-length mirror, raise your right foot and stomp, and go 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, until everything quits shaking. That's your body fat score. But what I mean by that, on one end, we can't live in the past of how things are now or how it used to be. But we've got to be able to look realistically at what we're talking about today. On the other end of the spectrum, for a lot of you folks in the USDA and state vets and in a private vet practice, you can't go put on Under Armour and look in the mirror and look like the mannequin. It's false advertisement. It don't work. So we've got to have a realistic look at the past and a realistic look at the expectations for the future. I'd like to focus today on 3 things, but not excluding anything else that y'all want to talk about. All these gentlemen are going to bring some great things to us today. I visited with them, and I'm really excited about what they're going to bring. I'd like to look at the challenges, not problems. We're way past problems. We're now into the challenge phase, and where we're at today and what our next steps are. And I'm looking for solutions. So if you've got a challenge that we are facing with anything that you want to ask them questions about, be prepared to have a potential solution. With that, I'll turn it over to y'all.
Good afternoon. I'm not going to go home and do that little test. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to scrub that image out of my mind. Nobody wants to see that, I don't think. So anyway, Have you all heard that we're doing a traceability project in Kansas? I think I don't know. I'm not sure that we've had any, at least not very many of our speakers today, not mention that, and I appreciate that. And I think that is. I'm pleased that last December KLA members recognize we've been supportive of traceability for a number of years and supportive in our policy, and that is what guides our staff, our professional staff, and our volunteer leaders is the member-driven policy. We have a policy supportive of traceability for a lot of years, but it has not, I think, put the proper emphasis on that topic. Our members recognized that, and last December added 4 words. Dr. Smith had those words up on the screen earlier today, but those 4 words were pretty key. So added mandatory and for all cattle to our traceability policy. Now, mandatory that's kind of a magic word in this realm, right? And leads to lots of conversations and cussing and discussing and probably more at the end of the day at the bar as folks get together and talk about it more. What we took from that, more than some desire by our members to go and say to USDA or to KDA or whomever, impose upon us a traceability system, it was a signal for us to get off our tails and let's do something, and let's make progress. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about that we need it. The industry needs it, and let's do something. And so that manifests itself in the Cattle Trace Project, and we've got awesome partners with the Department of Ag in Kansas, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Beef Cattle Institute at K-State, and some of our members working together to get that program off the ground and moving forward. And I think, I've been around for a while, and a number of the iterations of traceability, all the letters that we've used over the years, and I think I'm optimistic that this project will knock down some of the barriers and or the reasons that folks hold up as reasons why we can't do this and why it'll be impossible to have traceability, meaningful traceability in our business. So I'm really excited about our project and looking forward to the results, seeing those results, how it works in the real world with cow-calf producers at auction markets, at the feed yard, and at the processor. So Dr. Smith made this point, and I'm going to reiterate it. I think this is, Joe, your instructions about opportunity or challenges and opportunities here. The project, Cattle Trace Project, is very, very focused on animal disease traceability. From our perspective, from KLA's perspective, that's important because our policy is specific to animal disease traceability. But I think that's kind of like buying insurance, and it's important. We want it, but it's not very exciting, right? And so this purpose-built infrastructure that's part of our project, I think, is where we're really going to drive value back to the participants and the businesses, the producers, and the businesses that serve our industry coming alongside, using that technology, using that tag and the readers that are in place because of the project. That's where the value will really come back to individual producers, and so not just be insurance, and so not just a cost, but really drive value back. And when I can't remember now what was the link? I can't remember. Where's Neville at? What was that link? Whatever that poll that we had up that first break. Slido, thanks. But that first first bar, right? If you could find additional value, make your calves worth more. That was a popular reason for doing this, and so I think that's what excites me. In addition to having traceability and serving that purpose, the value that we can drive back, the things we can learn by taking advantage of this technology. Let's see. Next steps, Joe, was the other charge for us. So tags in for us for cattle trace. Tags going in this fall. We've got some cattle tagged already, and really trying to identify some cattle that we can track end to end, start to finish, and have that good test. The other piece that we're, I think, right in the thick of, and this goes to next steps as well, that cattle trace board of directors, so producer-driven effort that'll manage and own and manage the database. That group is talking through now, or will be shortly, protocols for how those data points will be accessed by our animal health authorities, and developing a set where there is certainty about having access when it's needed, but only when it's needed, and kind of answering that question that a lot of producers have, a lot of ranchers have, about who's going to have access to my information and when. Will it be secure, protected? I don't want all my details out there across the world. So I'll quit there and look forward to questions. Brian.
I won't be as eloquent as that. Everything we've talked about today applies to us, to Square B Ranch. We're a commercial operation. We have a seed stock operation. We have a program. We feed cattle out, and then we take them all the way to harvest and bring that information back to our producers. So traceability for us has been a huge management tool. We use the EIDs as a management tool, not only in our own herd, but the 2,000 to 3,000 head that we breed every fall of multiple producers throughout the state of Missouri. And we use the EIDs and the traceability for management from conception all the way to carcass information, and then bring it back to those herds. Traceability hasn't been an issue because we are showing those people how to make more money with their cattle. So we're, instead of just breeding 1,000 cows on our ranch, we may breed 4,000 cows in a fall season, and we use it as a management tool. We also use it as a tool to add value, like Chip Kemp talked about. Adding value takes the tension away from putting an EID in that cow, and that's one of the ways we use it. Challenges. Education at the local level. I loved what Michigan did, whether it was a little flyer in their checks that went out, something besides having a meeting with a government entity seems to be more effective, or it has been for us in our program. Challenges, we just talked about that, is we have not seen the challenge of traceability. We haven't had a lot of resistance there. Our resistance has been, let's show us how we can be more profitable, and that continues to grow in our operation. Opportunities, the opportunities are endless. We've basically take the segmented market away, and we breed the cows, calve them, feed them out, get the carcass data back, and then we bring that information back to the producer so he can actually make good decisions in his own herd. And I think not only the opportunity for profit on those calves by taking the segmented market out of the way, but I think we're actually creating value within their herd. So their cow base is getting better. If they get up in age and they need to market their cow herd, they have data on those cows. It makes them more profitable. That takes the traceability issue, and it just goes out the window. Every single cow that is in our program gets an EID. they get blood pulled on them. Every calf that comes out of their facilities gets an EID, and they get blood pulled on them. And we carry that information all the way through. Every cow goes into, we use the GEM database, and all those cows that go into the GEM database, all those EID, the calves that follow that cow, all those EIDs follow that cow the entire time. So that's how we control it. That's all I've got.
So let me just do a little bit of history on my family. So my grandfather immigrated from the Azores Islands in the year of 1917. He was 12 years old, didn't speak a word of English, landed in Ellis Island, and had gotten some kind of sickness or skin problem when he was on the ship, and some kind doctor in New York took care of him for a few weeks. There was a note pinned on where he needed to go in California to meet up with his brothers. So he was on a train, 12 years old, no father, no mother, out to start off his endeavors in a new land, new opportunity. He worked with his brothers in California for a few years and scrapped up enough money to start his first dairy in 1928, so like a year before the stock market crash. He was very conservative in his spending and said, I'm not going to get married until I can afford a wife. So that took about 6 years. Growing up as a kid in my grandfather's farm, I started at the ground up. I spent my summer vacation when I was 7 years old riding my bicycle about a half a mile to the dairy farm because I felt sorry for the milkers. They had to milk cows, and when they got done, they had to go feed the calves, and I felt sorry for the calves. So I learned just by doing, and did a lot of work on the farming side. And so some of the things that I've learned since I've started working with dairy farms and being on a dairy farm and then having to be forced to sell out on a dairy farm because you're not profitable is just what's been happening to the ag industry in general. I can talk more specific about dairy. But do you realize that in the 1940s, we had over 1 million dairy farms in the United States? And today, we have about 46,000, on our way to 30,000 and then 25,000. We had 25 million dairy cattle back in the 40s. Today, we have about 9.3 million dairy cattle. So to kind of keep that in perspective, why that reduction has been about change, trying to survive. If I just take this light above me here, let's just say that that's the milk that a cow would produce for a year back in the 40s. Today, that same cow produces 4 lights in this room. So if you were in the 40s, you needed 6 cows to power this room. Today, we only need a cow and a half. So that efficiency is what's been helping drive growth. But overall, listening to a talk by Dr. Overton a few years ago, that the farming business is pretty much a break-even business if you take all the farms and put them together. So there's those that are innovative in figuring out how to make a living, and there's those that are not making the investments they need. Maybe it's because succession planning, the next generation doesn't want to work on the farm. But whatever the case may be, I think that's the biggest challenge we have in ag, in dairy especially, is a weak farm economy. So traceability helps us marketing our products. We got things kind of backwards when we get government subsidies. For example, it was bad to have butter in the 50s and 60s. If you have a chance, read the book, The Big Fat Lie. We're now going back to full-fat diets. But that creates a problem because you can only do so much with milk, turning it to butter. What do you do with the non-fat dry powder? That's the magical dust that all these warehouses have plenty of, but we don't know what to do with because it's depressing our milk price. You also have changing consumer preferences. So the millennials, they eat less at home. We've got competition with, and I won't call it milk, but almond juice, soy juice, coconut juice, eeny, miny, mo juice, whatever's out there. Or how about just water, right? We've got growth on water. So some of our customers that we work with have been innovative in trying to take this traditional product of milk and put some value into it. So if we can kind of play the video here, I'm going to show you what some dairy farmers are doing to survive. And so RFID has been something that we kind of dabbled in the mid-90s. It took about 10 years for that flywheel that Neville talked about to make one full revolution. By about the middle of the 2000s, 2005 or so, we started seeing adoption of RFID. And the easiest time in the dairy business to tag an animal is when they're born. You know, they're small, they're little, they can't run away, they're not going to cause too much harm to you. And it's a good way of getting them identified then and there because, like this cow here, she's going to be calving in about 2 hours when I took the video. This dairy farmer has taken a genomic sample of the animal, and that'll get sent to a lab to get their genetic blueprint on. There's a 2D barcode on the bottom which actually represents the same number as their ISO number. And then she'll get tagged with an RFID in the left ear. And we've had some people ask for a tag that has both the RFID and the panel together. It makes one less piercing. They see less ear infections. And then we'll have another management tag put on the other side. So that ideally is the ideal time to tag a calf. It's when they're born. And then those samples that were taken at birth, a few weeks later, they can take them and run them against their herd management system. And they're basically saying, before I send this sample in and pay $40 or $45 to find out the results, is this animal still alive? Or do I want to send this animal's results back in? So we've seen a lot of dairymen take advantage of RFID and an ISO number that helps with the CDCB measuring things. One of the biggest challenges we had when I started with Valley X software is we needed a unique number that the animal would have to contribute her production information and her classification of information to a database, this value-added data. And the challenge was, if you were using a brucellosis tag in California, it only took about 12 or 14 years to go through all the numbers, and what did they do? Started back with the next number or the previous number that they started in the beginning. So we started getting duplicates of animals in the system, and the USDA had to kick those out because you couldn't have two cows with the same identifier. So the ISO number stuff helped us a lot. It also helped with other things. So if somebody wants to collect milk weights, daily milk weights on animals, or they want to get calf weights at birth or calf weights at weaning, we have a unified identifier that's helping us in the value chain keep track of a lot of information. Whether that information makes it in a bigger database that a group of members or organization can take advantage of, or it's just on this local farm, it's really changed the dynamics of what farmers that have a game plan, have a succession plan on how they want to survive. So I'm from California. We have some of the strictest air regulatory things in our state. We're competing with the almond juice growers and the cities that for water and for land. And so a lot of these families that have been there for a long time, they want to survive. They don't want to give up the towel. A lot of them have relocated. I think the Midwest is like the last bastion in the United States to have strong agricultural products before we start worrying about South America. But the opportunities exist for those that want to take advantage of them. And the ISO RFID piece has really helped take care of that. And you'll see that in our talk in the next segment. But next steps is for farmers to control their risk and figure out how to take their milk products now and fractionate them. Make things that are non-traditional that the millennials and people are looking for alternative drinks. If any of you had a taste of Fairlife milk, that was an example of a dairy farmer that had to figure out how to take milk from New Mexico to Houston, Texas, or San Antonio, Texas, and that's a 700-mile trip, and milk's mostly water. So it didn't quite work out, but the technology was used later on to say, well, we can take a lot of the sugar, lactose out of the milk, we can put in twice as much protein, and we all have to be proud, us beef, dairy, pig, poultry, about providing a quality protein source to our nation and to people around the world, because the population is supposed to grow from currently 7.6 billion people to 10.5 billion people in 50 years. and the land mass for that is we're not going to get any more land, so we're going to have to be more efficient with what we have. And for young children and for us older people, you know, fall will be your number one killer for elderly. So a good protein source is helpful to keep strong bones, strong muscle mass. And so I'm really proud with all you here to lead that leadership, get that message out to people that we can do this, we can have a really good product, we can be traceable, and nothing to hide.
Any questions? I'll start us off with a question. What would y'all's thought process be? We already have a rule in place for cattle 18 months and older. I mean, that's without saying. And our charge as a cattle traceability working group was to enhance that first step. But if we included sexually intact heifers and bulls under 18 months, in other words, what would y'all's view on that be?
Well, that's easy for dairy. Hats off to the Michigan people for leading the charge there. It makes it easier to see somebody do it successfully and then try to implement it in their state. In California, it just passed in last April 2017 that all animals leaving their birth premise have to go out with an ISO ID, and I think they're working on trying to make that always electronic. And if you're an official tagging site, you can send your bull calves that way. But for our producers, it's been kind of a no-brainer just to get things identified on bulls, females. The states are really going to dictate above and beyond what the ADT has, but it just makes their jobs a lot easier. And these dairies, as they dwindle down, they're becoming multi-state. So I'll give you one story. One of my producers thought about tinfoil hats and black helicopters when I told him about getting ISO 840 numbers. He says, "Nah, I don't want to do that." I said, "Well, you know, if you don't do that and you decide to sell some cattle, you're going to have to cut those tags out and do it right." And so he bought some tags, not from me, but I found out that he had to cut those 982s out and put some 840s in because they were going across state lines. And the next order was for 840. So we don't see much pushback in the dairy industry.
I think it's a great marketing tool. The market continues to get bigger internationally, and we've got to have the ability to tell a story. And if you have that information, you can tell that story. If you go to I think one of the gentlemen talked about, if you go internationally, all the information that's on the package, it's coming to the United States. It's going to be there. You're going to be able to scan the barcode, and it's going to tell you where that meat came from, what farm it was raised on. All those things are going to be there, and you've got to have the information to be able to do that. We do it already ourselves. All of our producers do it, but I think it'd be something that'd be good for the country too.
Stopping short of feeder cattle, to me, a common sense approach for discussion. I mean, if you've got a yearling heifer, 12 months of age, most of the feeder heifers are already in the feed lot. So any other sexually intact heifer or bull at that age would probably go into an adult herd. Any other questions? That created some.
Brian, could you talk a little bit, what are your biggest challenges as you deal with your cooperators, your commercial customers, putting tags in, getting information back? What's the resistance points, and how do you overcome that?
Tagging calves. When we started this venture, the Quality Beef program was a program that was founded at the University of Missouri. It was kind of the backside of their Show Me Select. And when we bought the program and we started the venture, the one thing that I thought would be the biggest resistance would be the verification of the animals, keeping track of those, spending the money for AI, and the costs that are associated with that. But none of those were the resistance. The resistance was actually tagging the calves to their mothers. So our requirement is like I said, we go to their herd, we give them a number that will go into a computer system. Like I said, we use GEM. They get EID'd, and they have to tag the calf to that mother at birth. And that's been the biggest resistance. They're scared of their cows in a lot of cases. And we're talking about, once again, in Missouri, I think somebody, the state vet told me 37, is that right? Is the average size of the cow herd in the state. So that has been the biggest resistance, is actually tagging the calves. Once that calf is tagged and EID'd, that EID follows that calf all the way through the feedlot. It goes on the hook that they're hooked on at the packing plant, and all that information comes back from the packing plant, and we tie it back to the cow. And the biggest resistance that we face to date is tagging the calves.
William, in the dairy industry, we have a different environment in that they're using the EID very strongly for dairy management. It doesn't really necessarily translate to beef production real well. But you showed some genomic tie-in and some other things. What are some of the value-added things that over time you've seen brought into the dairy industry that the beef production complex could use to bring more value to the system?
I think Brian just alluded to it. I have one beef farmer that I work with. He happens to have a beef ranch and a dairy operation, but they use 840 buttons on their beef crop because they get information back from the slaughterhouse, the yield grade information. So for dairy, you're always looking to know how much milk did this cow produce. You're getting some type of information to let you know how profitable she is in the operation. So for the beef side, I think it's that getting some information back. It was said earlier about the 5-week-old calves in Alabama, right? It's just getting them something to know what to go off of to let them plan some more. I think it's a big benefit to get, from an education perspective, to get the producers to understand that it will take a while. I think in the beef industry, it's more fragmented. I think there's 750,000 cow-calf producers. We got 46,000 dairy farms. So when you all start consolidating down, it'll start to make some sense. But I think that's the differentiation, is what value do I get coming back? Will it make any decision changes that I do in my breeding program? Or whatever source verification whatever niches are out there.
I think we've got time for 2 or 3 more quick questions.
Just for the gentleman from Square B, it sounds like you have your own unique supply chain going, essentially. How far down are you tracing? I mean, is it just in at the carcass? Are you able to trace to individual cuts, and are you working on a program to trace to individual cuts?
Currently, we just at the carcass, and we look at everything on the carcass, not just yield grade and quality grade. We look at carcass weight, and then we, like I said, we tie that all back to the cow. And the most important part that we don't really talk about much, because we're always so focused on the carcass side, is the females. You got to track the females. You got to have a cow that's going to last 10 years in your herd. They're not profitable till year 6, so you can't give up on the female in this process. You got to have good quality females that will grow and grade well and be profitable for the producers. Otherwise, we're going to consolidate to 47,000. Not at this time. I feel like, just personally, vertical integration's come into this industry probably faster than we want it to, and our program will be prepared for that. We'll have traceability, we'll be able to tell a story, and we'll have the type of cattle that people want to buy and provide a good eating experience for the consumer.
I'm a livestock exporter, and Mr. Avila, I'm glad you brought up the genomic testing on the dairy cattle that's taking place. And the reason I wanted to just point something out, firsthand, clients that I have internationally, I can tell you on value added, I've got people right now in other countries that will not buy dairy cattle from us unless they've been genomically tested. And this is going to be new to a lot of the beef cattle producers. I'm personally very far away from genomic testing on my ranch, but I do see the train coming, and it's something we need traceability first and foremost, but these are factors that are going to weigh into international trade down the road that the dairy business is rocking it right now, and I'm glad they've gone that direction, and we will slowly follow suit down the road, but it's something that needs the attention. But the traceability that you've already got is enabling me to sell more cattle internationally. And also, the problem I'm having that needs to be pointed out for value added, if I can't trace these dams in the dairy business, I'm also losing customers. I can always trace the semen. Okay, the semen that goes in the dairy business is easy to trace, but I have clients that won't buy cattle because I can't trace the dams. So just like you were saying in Kansas, you've got to keep track of these mamas. It's really important.
The video that you saw about them tagging genomics, in order for dairymen to survive, they can't afford to raise every heifer that's born on their dairy. So if you have the opportunity to get an extra $200 per drop calf because it's a terminal cross as opposed to it being just another dairy animal, and you're going to raise heifers but you can't raise them all, we're getting into the beef business on the dairy side. We have no choice but to do that in order to be profitable. So the idea is to raise just enough heifers of the highest quality you can and get extra premium because on the beef market side there's somebody willing to pay for that.
We've got time for one more question. The gentleman right over here, I think you've got a microphone. No. Oh, I thought you were. I thought you had a question.
No, I'm good.
Is there any other questions, real quick? If not, let's give a round of applause.